We are so excited to have you here today to join us for our conversation. My name is Allie Hammond. I'm our marketing manager here at Virtuous. And really excited to be hosting and just here with my good friend Nathan Hill. Before we dive in, I want to just cover a few quick ground rules. So feel free to put any of your questions in the chat. We'd love to hear from you and love to hear more about, if you find anything that's working for you. Feel free to make any comments. We also have this really cute little emoji button at the bottom, which is just really cute. It sends a bunch of little hearts. So feel free to use that as well. Feel free to put your chats. You don't have to wait till the end to ask your questions. The session will also be recorded as well, and the recap will be sent out and able to have access to all the resources. Also, feel free to take a two-minute survey. We'd love just to hear from you and your feedback about the content and just your overall experience. We're always looking to improve, so we just love to learn more of your feedback as we go throughout the session today. Without further ado, though, I am very excited to introduce our good friend Nathan Hill from NextAfter on this conversation of retention is broken and there's one way to fix it, which is such a bold statement. I love it. And really excited to kick us off. But before I pass it over to Nathan, I really want to just start us off with a quick question. And that is, why does generosity matter? And so NextAfter and Virtuous are actually teaming up together to address a single issue, and that is generosity. So here we believe that generosity has the power to create profound change in the world and in the hearts of the giver. So with that in mind, it's our mission to move the needle forward on global generosity by helping nonprofits better connect with and inspire their givers. And how do we do that? We do that through equipping nonprofit teams through the power of technology and data to help create personalized experiences that actually help you connect more personally with your donors. So we do that through this methodology called responsive fundraising. And what responsive fundraising is really just this framework that believes that in giving every donor that major gift donor experience by connecting with them personally. So that first looks like being able to listen, to use different types of signals and surveys and different types of technology to be able to understand our donors better and understand them a little bit behind our gift, which helps them then connect personally with them to be able to build that deeper donor relationship and be able to really use different engagements and touch points to be able to help build that relationship, which then when you connect with them more personally helps you suggest the right next step at the right time. And then you continue to adapt and to grow and to continue to build that relationship for years to come. So without further ado, though, NextAfter works to decode what actually works in digital fundraising and then equip nonprofits with that knowledge to fulfill their vision to unleash the most generous generation in the history of the world. So without further ado, I will go ahead and pass it over to my good friend Nathan. He will take it away. You guys will be in good hands.
Awesome. Thank you, Allie. Thanks for that setup. And super excited to dive in because this is a topic that has been, on my brain since I started working in the nonprofit space just in general, but more specifically this entire year plus some, as we've been talking about doing some research to try to really get more meaningful data about what works to actually grow retention. Everything that we're going to cover today falls inside of that responsive fundraising framework. This isn't something different or outside of that. We're really trying to use research to really understand what are those key touch points inside of that framework even that are going to move the needle in a significant way to actually lead to more people, not just giving the first time, but giving the second time and the third time and often into the future. But where we got to start is addressing the problem at hand, which is that as this is titled, retention is broken. And the way to fix it may be a little bit counterintuitive or at least different than what you might expect. So let's dive in and we'll look at some of the data here's the most recent M&R benchmarks as it relates to online donor retention for one-time donors at least. They update their stats every year. A lot of this is kind of based on survey data, so it's probably within a certain margin of error here, but you can see the past 4 years of donor retention for an online one-time donor. In 2022, or at the end of 2022, the retention rate was 29%, which really isn't all that great. That means that about 70% of the people that gave to you in the previous year didn't give in the next year. It's really hard to build a program based on that kind of retention. When you look specifically at new donors, online new donors in that time, what they were finding is that a new donor specifically, 16% is the retention rate. Very, very few people that you spend time and energy and resources, financial investment to go actually acquire, to give to your organization, to go impact a cause you care about. Very few of those people are actually going to turn around in the following year and continue to give. Again, super hard to build a program, whether it's digital or it's your holistic fundraising program, off of retention rates that look like this. Now, retention has been a problem in this space since I started in it about 10 years ago. And so what I wanted to do is we dove into some of this research on retention is see how far back can I find meaningful data to kind of understand, is this a relatively new problem, or how far back does this problem go? And quite honestly, the data doesn't go back far enough to get the clearest answer I would like, but here's what I was able to find. According to the Fundraising Effectiveness Project, this is a 2012 report reporting backwards to data even in 2005, so almost 20 years ago. What they were finding was that for every 100 donors that a nonprofit was gaining, they were losing 82. Very hard even 20 years ago then to go build a program on top of this kind of retention. You're losing the majority of donors that, again, you spend that time and effort and energy and investment to go acquire. And you would think after 20 years of this being a problem and all the conversation in our space about how do we fix it, how do we improve it, what are the strategies, what are the tactics, that we would see something that's moving the needle in a positive direction. And certainly there's indicators of different tactics and techniques that may improve things here and there, but holistically, we haven't yet solved this problem, which maybe would be surprising to some of us, because if you just go do a quick Google search for donor retention strategies, you're going to find a ton of them and a lot of guarantees that these things are going to sort of blow your mind and change the game for you. Now, I don't want to call anyone out specifically, but this was a couple months ago, I did this search, donor retention strategies, and there's a lot of things that come up. I think the headline of this article is interesting. It says donor retention strategies, 6 next level practices. I'm going to show you some of these next level practices, and you can let me know in the chat if you think that these are truly next level. Number 1, we can offer creative giving options like e-cards. Probably some value in this for some kind of donors. Personally, I'm never going to see an e-card. I'm not going to open an e-card. It's probably going straight to a promotions tab or maybe even a junk folder. This feels like maybe it was relevant 15 years ago, but not so much, at least for me today. Maybe for some it's valuable, but I don't think this is the next level approach that's going to change the game. Make your donors' first giving experience a good one. This is probably meaningful. We should certainly be doing this. In fact, we spend a lot of time and energy and effort testing what actually works to make that experience as optimized as it possibly can be. And we think that's meaningful, but I don't know that that's going to fundamentally change the game on donor retention. In fact, this is like table stakes. This is what we should be doing and should have been doing for a long time, is making sure that giving experience is functional and efficient and provides people with the right context to choose to give and all that sort of stuff. But I wouldn't say this is a next level strategy. You've got things like this: create a membership program. Membership programs can be valuable. For some organizations, they're really helpful. So for some, maybe it's not that helpful to have a dedicated program, but you just take recurring donations. So good for some, but maybe not for all, probably doesn't change the game. Hosting stewardship events. Pretty much every organization is doing something like this, has some kind of events for donors to get people involved, showcase the impact, ask for donations, etc. But we're still stuck in this world of low donor retention. Offer volunteer options that target your donors' skills. This is probably a really great thing, but not everyone has the time to go invest to be a volunteer to get to that level of engagement with an organization. And then 6, follow up to share appreciation. This, again, is probably a table stakes kind of strategy. If you're receiving donations, you should go follow up to say thank you and show your appreciation. I don't think any of these options are going to meaningfully move the needle on retention. They certainly haven't to date, and there's no reason to expect that, if you go implement one of these tomorrow, that it's going to radically change your retention performance. Let me know if I'm wrong in the chat. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. I don't think they're going to change the game. And so then this leads us to this question, if there's so many tactics that are out there that are supposed to be, the next level strategy is going to change the game, going to move the needle on retention. We talk about it as consultants all the time, what we think is going to work, but it's not working. How do we actually learn what really, truly meaningfully works? Now, at NextAfter, this is kind of our approach. We do one primary thing, which is we help nonprofits grow their digital fundraising. And we do that in three sort of main ways, sort of three key pillars, if you will. One, we're a research lab where we go out into the world, into the nonprofit world, and go make a bunch of donations to nonprofit organizations to try to understand what are nonprofits and their fundraisers doing today to try to grow giving. But just looking at what other people are doing does not tell us what actually works, but it can give us new ideas that we can go put to the test. And so we do a lot of A/B testing and optimization. We're a full service digital agency, doing everything from donor acquisition to email campaigns to like year-end campaigns. We are in the weeds of getting those things put together and installed right now. Full service digital agency, but everything is rooted in testing and optimization. For those of you who may not be familiar with A/B testing, in short, for an example, we might be looking at a donation page and wondering, is message A going to be better or worse than message B on this page? And so in a constrained time period, we're going to split the traffic and we're going to test version A versus version B and see what actually works using statistics to prove what works to grow giving or what might not, what might actually be harmful. And so to date, we've run over 5,700 online fundraising experiments trying to, as Ali said, decode what works to grow giving and to grow generosity. And then everything that we learn from research, from testing, through our agency work, we then turn into training, even like this webinar today, to go equip you and everybody else in our space with what we're learning actually works. We've applied all of our research in this past year to trying to at least start answering this question of what truly meaningfully actually is going to help solve the retention problem. Now, in the past, most of these mystery donor research studies have really focused on one thing, which is what do donors actually experience, which is really critical to start as fundraisers and as marketers to put ourselves in the shoes of a donor, have empathy for them, and then figure out how do we optimize this process? Because in a lot of cases, there's barriers to actually giving that we can help these donors overcome. But what we did at the start of this year was we teamed up with the folks at Virtuous, our good friends, to try and understand this combination of not just what are donors experiencing, but also how might it be impacting performance. And so we're able to look at the donor experience and sync that up with actual retention data to try to find the commonalities and the trends of, what are the things that high performing organizations in terms of retention are doing that we might test to see, is this really the tactic that's going to move the needle? What are the commonalities of even low performers that maybe we should steer clear of or avoid? And so we released this study a few months ago, which is part one of this comprehensive online donor retention report. Part one is looking at the value proposition or the messaging in the donation experience. How do organizations articulate why someone should give rather than give to some other organization or even give at all? We're looking at 211 nonprofits. We're looking at all their donor retention KPIs, thanks to Virtuous, who helped us kind of build out this sample of organizations and have a window into some of that performance data. And then again, we're syncing that up with an analysis of the actual donor experience. Our plans is to start here at value proposition, but then also look at the full donor experience. And then to look at new donor onboarding, to look at cultivation, to even right now, as we're starting to get into year-end period, we're capturing data to see what are nonprofits going to do to try to activate these new donors again during a high urgency season. So there's lots of more research coming over the next several months around this topic of retention. But where we started is with some really high level questions. And I'll share a few of them with you, and then we'll look at some tactics around them too. But number one is this: does retention vary by vertical? And yes, you can go look at a bunch of other different benchmarks and see nuance and variance between different verticals. We wanted to see for ourselves between our own client data as well as all these different virtuous customers that we're analyzing as well. How does retention vary based on sort of what category you fall into? And so here's kind of the methodology. The blue bars here, these are high performing organizations in terms of retention rates. The orange bar are kind of middle of the road performers. The low bar or the yellow bar is low performers. Now, the way we split this up is we just divided our sample into thirds. The top performers, the top third, the middle third, and the bottom third. And there's a lot more ways you can sort of spin the data to draw out new insights and things here. But what I want to show you is this chart. This is every vertical that we're measuring and looking at all those different kind of tiers of retention performance. And what we see just right off the top is the blue bars that are the highest. We'll just simplify this down to colors. The blue bars that are the highest are in these two verticals, faith-based and international organizations. And so in short, these two verticals have the most top performing retention organizations. We'll look maybe at a little bit of why, or at least a hypothesis as to why here in a moment. The inverse of this, look for the yellow bars. The highest yellow bars, which is the most low performers, are in these categories of education, health, and public policy. They tend to have the most low performing organizations in terms of donor retention. And then obviously the question is why. And before we look at the why, I don't want you to see these stats and say, well, I fall in the health category or I fall in the education category, so I guess I'm stuck. I guess we're just doomed to have poor retention rates. Because what we can do is go look at what's working in these other categories and try to draw some insights from what's working and see how can we apply that in our space. Maybe get some inspiration from someone else that's seeing something be high performing, and go figure out the creative ways you can apply it in your context. Here's what we see just sort of over the top. And a lot of this is kind of hypotheses about these different verticals, hypotheses that can be put to the test. But what we see for high performers, oftentimes these verticals are focused on values first, values focused messaging in terms of their fundraising. We said a lot of these high performers are faith-based. And so they often have strong core beliefs between their organization that are shared with their ideal donor. Many of those international organizations too have a faith-based component to them, or maybe missions organizations that are doing international relief kind of work. These organizations tend to have a longer term focus in even their positioning of their fundraising appeals. They're not just focused on what's happening right here, right now, but they're casting a vision for how they want to see the world changed and impacted over time. Now, if you work in education, I see there's a comment. I'm in education and religion. We chose one category. We didn't do any sort of blends of the two. That would be a really interesting exercise. But whether you're in education or healthcare or public policy or environmental or something else, we can think about how do we, even if you don't have sort of a faith at the core center of your alignment with your ideal donors, you still have a shared vision as to how you want to see the world made different and impacted, a core problem you're trying to solve. And so how do we align our messaging around that, not just for the short-term focus, but also for the long-term impact? On the low-performing side, again, many of these organizations are very current events driven, especially when you are in the policy and advocacy space. Oftentimes fundraising appeals are around legislation that's on the table today, or an issue going on in the world that's happening right now and needs impact right now. But it's less about casting a vision for the future and how together we can work towards seeing something change meaningfully over time. Oftentimes there's temporary affinity, short-term focus. So if you find yourself in one of those categories, how do you start to lean your messaging more towards what you see on the left side of your screen and less so about what you see on the right side of the screen? Something that we can put to the test. So coming back to this question, does it vary by vertical? Heck yeah, it does. And there's a lot of really interesting things that we can glean from that and go put to the test. I wanted to start here, and we intentionally started here with some of these higher level questions around verticals and revenue size. We also looked at traffic performance and how might that impact things. We intentionally started there to see what interesting insights can we draw out, but in the back of our heads thinking, is this really sort of like the end all be all question of this whole research endeavor? Is retention simply just a matter of who has the most recurring donors? Maybe that's the whole thing. Maybe that's the whole story. And so we dove into the data. And here's what we found off the top. What we did was we looked at the the total active donor file of these organizations. And we split out what percentage of active donors are actually recurring donors. And what we found in just this kind of high level view, you see the blue bar is high performing retention organizations. 29% of their donors are recurring donors. So this is sort of this might seem on the surface to be the smoking gun, if you will. We just need more recurring gifts. So how do we get more recurring gifts? But before we go claim that as like the ultimate solution, we need to go compare this to what we found in the verticals. Because what we should see, if this is the ultimate solution to growing retention, what we should see is that those high performing verticals should also have some of the highest percentages of recurring donors. Here's what we saw when we overlaid these two different data points. This is every vertical, now looking at their percentage of recurring donors. What we found was these top 4 performing verticals in terms of recurring donors had a mix of retention performance, which is pretty fascinating. We certainly had a high retention vertical in here, the international organizations, but we also saw some mid performers and we saw some low performers, which starts to tell me that recurring giving, yes, it's important, but maybe it's not the end all be all solution that oftentimes we crack it up to be. Having recurring donors leads to greater lifetime value. It certainly impacts retention in a meaningful way. But if I only sign up to give you a recurring donation and I get it for 10 months and I cancel before I get to 12 months, then I don't actually get counted as a retained donor going into the next year. I gave for a little bit and now I'm gone. So just acquiring the gift doesn't guarantee retention. Does that make sense? I think this stuff is very interesting. And here's what we're starting to put together as more or less the recipe for high donor retention. It needs more testing. It needs more data. But here's where we're working from. Donor retention takes 2 primary ingredients. It takes this sort of values-focused fundraising, focused on the long-term impact, focused on those kind of shared core beliefs we have with our donors, less about short-term initiatives and short-term affinity and more about long-term impact, combined with intentionality about how we build a recurring donor program. And these 2 things, from what we're seeing, should start to lead us to higher donor retention rates. And doesn't it just make sense that these 2 things go hand in hand and that they go together? If you're trying to get someone to sign up to give to you on a monthly basis for a long-term period of time, don't we have to go cast a compelling vision for what we want to see changed in the world over time? Maybe projecting a solution that's going to take time and effort and energy investment. It's not going to get solved in 1 month or in 6 months. It's going to maybe take years of people like you committing to solving this problem through your generosity and through your giving. It makes sense that these 2 things would go hand in hand. And so where I want to go for the rest of our time is to look at a few tactics, a few things around value proposition and how we can bolster and improve our value proposition. We'll also look at retention and some different tactics and some techniques that we can use in order to boost recurring giving as well. Let's start with the value proposition. We don't have time to cover everything that we have learned works about value proposition. We have a 4-hour course that dives deep into all that stuff. We're going to hit some high-level tactics today. The first one being, we can test strengthening the appeal of our value proposition, of our reasons to give that are communicated, not just on the donation page, but also in direct mail appeals, in email appeals, in advertising, any channel where you're asking for money. We can test, how do we make the appeal and the message stronger? This really has everything to do with a core question that we ask when evaluating the strength of the copy on the page. How badly do I, your ideal donor, want to make the impact that you're communicating? This is what we call the appeal. Now, I love this experiment. I show it often because it's just such a good example of this organization leaning into testing as a means of giving their donors a voice to tell them what actually resonates and what's actually going to lead towards more people giving. And so what they did is they have this little tribute widget on their website. This organization is Caring Bridge. If you're familiar with them, they help provide like health journal sort of websites. If you're going through a health crisis or a health journey, it helps you stay in touch with loved ones without having to like go text an update to every single person in your contact list. People can leave you comments and words of encouragement. And it's a fantastic tool to keep people connected during a health journey like that. and they run entirely on donations. So they have these giving widgets, and it's morphed and shaped over time as they're testing. But here's a test from a few years ago where they're trying to really figure out what's the most meaningful way for us to position the appeal of the offer, why someone should give. Version A says, honor Cade and Callan with a donation to Caring Bridge. You make Cade and Callan's website possible. Pretty straightforward, to the point. They tested reversing the order. Maybe it makes some sort of difference in the donor's mind if they sort of see the elements in a different way. Cade's Caring Bridge site is supported by generous donors like you. Make a donation to Caring Bridge in honor of Cade. So they lead with the function and then talk about honoring the person that you're following. So they reverse the order of the elements. They also wondered, what if we just focus directly on the impact the donation has on keeping the site running? Help Cade stay connected to family and friends. Make a donation to Caring Bridge to keep Cade's site up and running. Very much about keep the servers alive, keep things functioning, keep things going. And then they also wondered in the same experiment, what if we lean to more the emotional angle, the human angle of this, not just talking about functionally what your gift does for the website, but what does it do for the person? And in this case, you can show your love and support for Cade by making a donation to Caring Bridge that keeps his site up and running. The primary emphasis is on showing love and support for the person. The function is by keeping the site up and running. These are all 4 genuine ideas that could lead to greater giving, but they don't know until they put it to the test. What they did when they tested it, here's what they saw. Treatment number 1 led to a marginal increase in donations, but not at what we would call a high enough level of confidence, statistical validity, if you will. Treatment 2, same sort of thing, marginal uptick, but not at a very high level of confidence. But treatment 3 led to a 67% increase in donations. If we're trying to figure out how we craft better messaging that aligns with the shared values we have with our donors, the shared kind of core beliefs, the impact that we both together want to see made in the world, then we have to put our best ideas to the test. We can't just assume we know. Even just by looking at survey data, we can't assume that we know what's going to lead more people to say yes to giving. We can use survey data to inform this messaging, but ultimately we have to put it to the test to see what meaningfully is going to move the needle to get more people to say yes to giving. So that's one approach. Test the strength of your appeal. Secondly, you can contextualize your message. And again, lots of these aren't going to blow your mind, but I want to show you some of the data around these things to show you how impactful putting the time and energy and effort into this can be. If we can contextualize our message for specific audiences based on their motivation and their experience, we might see greater giving. So here's an example from Compassion International. The majority of their donors are giving on a recurring basis already. And they're sponsoring a specific child who may live in another country overseas somewhere across the globe, who has critical needs that need to be filled, and just they have daily needs that aren't being met outside of these sponsorships. And so a sponsor gets to help fund things like healthcare and access to education and just basic needs for these children living in all sorts of places and many times impoverished communities around the globe. However, these sponsorships don't necessarily cover every single need that comes up. And that's what they're trying to articulate in this fundraising appeal. But they do it in a generic way. They're talking to the person. It says, Dear Joel. So they're talking to them by their first name, but they make more of a generic appeal. Thank you for caring deeply about children in poverty. They're trying to fill sort of the where most needed fund. Today, we would like to give you the opportunity to shine the light of hope in a new way for these kids. Would you consider donating to the where most needed fund? Solid appeal, but fairly generic. What they tested was for their sponsors, really asking this question. If I am a current sponsor of a child, why should I give an additional one-time gift rather than just continue my normal giving and just kind of put this email in the archive and forget about this donation page? How do you contextualize it for these people who are already giving on a monthly basis? So they made some changes, and I'll highlight a few things for you. They tried to step out of the fundraising seat, take the fundraising hat off, and put themselves in the shoes of the donor. What would they expect in terms of the communication back to them? What they tried in their messaging is to say, first of all, I want to take a minute and thank you for being a sponsor. They're making sure that they address their relationship right off the bat. I'm grateful that you faithfully give, recognizing the relationship, already sort of building a bridge to say, I know you and you know me, and we can trust each other. That's implicit in the copy. Moving further down, they say, here's something you might not know. Sponsorship doesn't cover every need that Wayne and his family and his friends encounter. And as a sponsor, you genuinely may not know that. You may be under the impression that my monthly donation, kind of covers everything for Wayne and for other kids that I may sponsor. I didn't know this. They go on, they say lots of things can come up, from unplanned medical needs to disaster relief when a hurricane or earthquake strikes. Oh yeah, that stuff makes sense. That stuff happens all the time. I hear about it in the news. I just never thought that it happened to my sponsor child Wayne here. And so then they go on, they make the direct appeal. Would you consider giving a gift to help cover additional needs for Wayne and our other sponsored children around the world? And what they saw by contextualizing the message for the specific motivation of these people was a 101% increase in donations. Now, it's tempting to hear things like this and then go super overboard and go customize your copy for like 100 different segments. That rarely is worth the time and the effort. You have to test your way in to try to understand what are those unique motivating factors that are worth contextualizing your message for. Again, the only way you get there is through testing and through really looking at your data. So don't go overboard, but start to do this with different kind of key segments in your donor audience. How do you contextualize your message for them? And then finally, on the value proposition side of things, we also need to cultivate. We can't just expect that the copy they read on one appeal or on one donation page is going to power them through giving for years to come. We have to cultivate the relationship and welcome these new donors when they come on board in a meaningful way. We share this stat often in lots of our training as we sort of look at our own client base, the organizations we're working with on a day-to-day basis, trying to analyze and understand the impact of multi-channel communication. And one thing I want to call out for you today is this. You can see the value of an offline-only donor sitting at $159. When you add an email address for that offline donor, even if they never give to you in an online channel, their value goes up almost by 100%, from $159 to $301. Why? Because if you have their email address, you can cultivate them on an ongoing basis in a different channel where you can quickly share news updates and stories and all that sort of stuff that keeps people engaged in understanding how their ongoing giving is impacting the cause that they care about. But the key here is you have to actually email them. You have to actually communicate and cultivate. And in part 2 of this retention study, as we're starting to dive deeper into the full donation experience, as well as the first 7 days of communication with a new donor, what we're finding thus far is in that first 7-day window, that first week of being a new donor, 51% of nonprofits sent no cultivation emails to these donors within the first 7 days. And you may say, 7 days, that's like right away. That's probably too soon to even email. But what we have found, and there's lots of data to suggest this, is that the best time to engage with someone who has just given to you and actually make the best first impression is right now and right away. There's some stats from Campaign Monitor about the average kind of read rates of a welcome email being about 40+% higher than a standard email later on. There's some data from GetResponse looking at about 7 billion emails from a couple of years ago, showing that engagement rates with emails fall off over time the further away you get from that initial point of engagement. So if we want to make a good impression on a donor, we should start to cultivate them right away by showing them through story, through newsletters, through video, through all sorts of things, how their gift is being used and how they are making an impact on the thing that they wanted to when they actually said yes to giving. We got to start cultivating right away. Now, let's talk about recurring giving for a little bit. On the recurring giving side, there's so much that can be done, both on the copy side of it and the messaging, but also on more the technical side. And how do we get a better understanding of the process in order to optimize it for the new donor or for the potential donor? So we'll look at a few tactics here as well. The first being, and again, this is not a next level strategy either, but what we've found is that most people don't even do some of the basics here. We have to give unique reasons why someone should sign up to become a recurring donor. Again, that doesn't sound like all that transformative. You're probably saying, yeah, I know that. But do you do it? Do you do it on your donation page? Do you do it in your appeals? Do you give them unique reasons why they should give monthly rather than just make a one-time gift? I'll show you some data and you can see kind of where you where you fall in the chart here in a moment. But let me show you an experiment. Version A versus version B, they're the same email. They're both asking people to become a monthly donor. All the copy you can see on your screen up until that little blue call to action link is exactly the same. If you scroll down in the email, they added a few quick bullet points underneath that's articulating the unique benefits that you can get if you become a monthly donor. This isn't even talking about additional impact you can make. This is just like what you get back for yourself. So there's probably other ways you can even bolster this too, but I'll highlight these for you. They've got 1, 2, 3, 4 bullet points here talking about when you become a cornerstone partner, which is their membership program. Here's the things that are unique that you're going to get back that you don't get if you just make a one-time donation. And what they saw by just 4 bullet points explaining the benefits, it led to a 123% increase in people saying yes to becoming a recurring donor. This isn't, again, a next level strategy, but it might lead to next level results if you're not already doing this in your appeals or on your page. We've also seen things like this in experimentation and A/B testing. Version A here is a pretty standard gift array. You choose from your different options. You've got like the other amount if you want to put in something custom, and then you choose your frequency, one time versus monthly. What this organization tested was adding just a little call out that says, did you know when you make a monthly gift, here's the additional impact that it can make. By adding just that little line of copy, drawing attention to the monthly option and showcasing just a tiny bit of the additional value and impact it can make, it led to a 48% increase in people saying yes to becoming a recurring donor. This is a really interesting test too, because it specifically led to this result for people who were new donors. So these are brand new donors coming in and giving a recurring gift on their first time giving, just because we let them know the impact that a recurring gift can make more so than a one-time gift. These are simple strategies and simple tactics that we can put to the test. What's fascinating, again, as we're diving into the full donation experience, what we are finding is that 86% of nonprofits don't provide any meaningful reasons why someone should make a recurring donation on their donation page. We're talking about main donation pages, and that's not all. They're not all always focused on getting someone to give a recurring gift, but maybe they should be, and maybe we should at least add a little bit of copy to call out the value of it, to give people the option, not just functionally on the form, but mentally give them the option to show them there's another way that you can support this thing that you care about, and you can actually do so in a much more meaningful way. And you might see more people saying yes just by giving them that option, even in the copy. Lots of things, again, we can test around that. This is a more technical tactic that just requires a deeper understanding as to how does the payment system work. So what we can do on these pages, whether it's a monthly upgrade page or even our main donation page, if someone has chosen that monthly gift option, what if we just defaulted the payment type to people starting the recurring gift, not from a credit card, but from an ACH transaction or through giving through their bank? Because the reality is that people change banks a whole lot less frequently than they change credit cards. The average, I was just looking this up earlier, the average bank account is about 17 years active. But if you're playing like the travel points game with the credit card, you may be activating a credit card for 12 months and then forgetting about it. Those cards at a maximum, have expiration dates from 3 to 5 years out. So in the best case, that payment type is going to last 5 years at the max, not 17. And then how many times does your credit card information get stolen? You got to cancel it. You get a new card. You got a new number, all that sort of stuff. It's much better if we can get an ACH payment. What's really fascinating, my friend Brady, who works at Charity Water, he shared these stats in a presentation he gave at our NEO Summit a couple of years ago. As they're trying to test and evaluate their whole recurring giving operation, everything from acquisition to cultivation, onboarding, offboarding when someone cancels, win back strategies, what they found is that monthly donors who give via their bank have an 84% greater lifetime value. And they ran this test on a monthly donation page to basically see, can we default to the ACH payment type without harming conversions? Because if it's going to lead to fewer people giving in the first place, that might not be worth it. But if it doesn't impact conversions, but we get more people to give via ACH, that's a win for us. And what they found running this experiment was that defaulting to ACH made no change whatsoever in conversions on the page, which means that a higher percentage of people are continuing on with the ACH option, which means their lifetime value is 84% higher had we not given them that as the default option. Is that interesting? There's just simple tactics like this that we can do that can really move the needle in a meaningful way. However, 39% of nonprofits don't actually have an ACH payment option on their form in the first place, let alone defaulting to it if someone has chosen a monthly gift option. So we got to do even some of the table stakes things just to provide the option that's actually going to lead to better retention and better lifetime value of these donors. Now, this is a bunch of tactics. There's so many more that we could unpack, so many more that we could dive into, and tactics are meaningful. Tactics are helpful. They show us little things we can do to move the needle along the way. But tactics and new strategies and one-off strategies, they're not going to fix retention for us. The reality is this has been a problem for at least 20 years, and there have been a billion tactics that are supposed to change the game for us that have come out in the past 20 years. But retention is still kind of in the same spot it was 20 years ago. So what's the way to fix retention? I'm here to advocate that I think there's only one meaningful way that we can actually fix retention. And it has a whole lot less to do with a strategy or a tactic and a whole lot more to do with a mindset and a mindset shift for us. This is one of my favorite books. Some people love Freakonomics. Some people hate Freakonomics. I don't care. This book's really good. And this is the sequel to the Freakonomics book. And I had the opportunity to see these two authors speak at a marketing Sherpa conference, probably, eight to 10 years ago, somewhere in that time frame. And this book for me, and one of the stories they shared in particular, has been really helpful as I've just changed my thinking about how do we meaningfully uncover the answer to a problem, whether it's in fundraising or something else. How do we meaningfully get solutions to problems? So this is not my story I'm going to share. This comes from this book. It comes from these authors, so I'm not taking credit for it, but I want to pass it on to you because I think it might be helpful for us as we think about how do we solve this problem of retention together. So the authors of this book, they sat down with an international retailer, and this international retailer, they're advertising in 40 different markets across the US. And so they're sitting down with them, and they're talking about their marketing and their advertising strategies and trying to figure out what are the ways that we can grow it. How do we improve results? And what these advertisers were saying is that across these 40 markets, we're running two different types of ads. We're running TV ads and we're running newspaper ads. The TV ads are really expensive, so we can't run them all the time. So there's a few key times of year when we run them. But what we know is that TV ads are 4 times more effective than our newspaper ads. So then obviously the question is, well, why? How do you know that they're 4 times more effective than the newspaper ads? And so what they said was, well, it's simple, because when we run them, we see a 4 times increase in sales. Okay, well, when do you run them? Well, yeah, because they're so expensive, we only run them around these kind of major purchase days, on Black Friday, around Christmas, and around Father's Day, which should give you some pause and cause you to scratch your head a little bit. You think they're 4 times more effective, but you run them on the days when people are most likely to actually be making a purchase anyway. Like the holiday season is the biggest shopping season of the entire year. So how do you know your TV ads are what's actually driving people to buy and not just the season and those major buying seasons? So what they suggested was, well, what if you ran a test? What if you took these newspaper ads that you're running that you don't think are as effective and turn them off in half of the markets and see what happens? And they said, we can't do that. That's crazy. We can't do that. We'll lose our jobs. What they said is we'll be like the kid from Pittsburgh. And let me pause for a moment, because I said those words a couple of weeks ago at a conference, and someone at the back of the room said, hey, what's that about Pittsburgh? This has nothing to do with Pittsburgh. It's just the location of the person in the story. Okay, I just want to make that clear for any Pittsburgh people in the crowd. Nothing bad about Pittsburgh. It's just that's where this person was, where the story took place. So they said, we'd be like the kid from Pittsburgh. Well, what happened to the kid from Pittsburgh? What's that story? There's an intern in the market, in the Pittsburgh market, whose job was to make sure for a summer that they had all the newspaper ad buys actually put together and it was going to go out into market. And for one reason or another, I don't want to blame the intern because who knows what happened, but they didn't go out. The newspaper ads didn't go out for an entire summer. That intern got fired, lost his job, they moved on. So then the question is, well, they got turned off for the summer. What did you see? What was the impact of on performance? What was the impact on sales? And the executives at this retailer kind of scratched their heads and like, well, we didn't think to check. We're so confident we know what works, so we didn't even think to check the data when we had an opportunity to. So they backed into it. They looked historically at performance during that season when the quote unquote kid from Pittsburgh didn't get the newspaper ads out. And what they found was that after a whole summer of not running a single ad in the paper in that market, was that it made no difference. It didn't change sales at all. So they're investing all this money in newspaper ads, and now their one data point actually says, maybe this is a waste of our marketing dollars. Maybe this is a waste of our advertising dollars. But they weren't willing to admit that they didn't have the answers, that they didn't know what works in order to actually check the data and figure out what can meaningfully move the needle on their sales. How could they better use their spend? And so the whole point of this book and the whole point of this story and what I hope you take away from it, what I've taken away from it that's been transformational for me is this. If we want to meaningfully grow results, if we want to meaningfully solve problems, if we want to meaningfully fix retention, it does not start with a tactic and it does not start with a strategy. It starts with actually an act of humility on our part to admit one primary thing, which is that I don't know. I don't know the answers. I don't know what the solution is. But we can't just stop at this act of humility because then we're just like, I don't know, and we leave. And then the problem never gets solved. It has to be followed up by this, but maybe I can find out. Maybe I can use data and testing and optimization and critical questions to actually uncover the answer. But we're never going to get to a result if we don't first admit that we don't yet have the answers. So it takes an act of humility on our part, because then we can go give our donors a voice through testing to figure out what meaningfully is going to move the needle. There's a bunch more we could unpack and we could cover. I'll save some of that for this report. If you go scan that QR code on your screen, you'll come to a landing page where you can actually go download this whole first part of this study for free and look at what we learned about what impacts retention and see it through the lens of the value proposition. Here shortly, we'll have a part 2 ready to go that looks at the full donation experience. Going into 2024, we'll have more data and more research around new donor onboarding, cultivation, year-end, high urgency, how all those different seasons play into the retention cycle and the retention problem that we're trying to solve. So go check that out. Go get a copy of that. And again, special thank you to Virtuous for helping make this study a possibility and really choosing through their data to go invest in trying to get answers for all of us as to what's going to move the needle. The last thing I want to share with you, and then we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A, is this. We're trying something different. Over the past several years, we've been doing 1 billion webinars, and people have been doing webinars for years and years and years. There's a time and there's a place for a webinar like today to unpack, complex research and that sort of thing. But if I'm being quite honest, the internet is saturated with webinars, and we wanted to try something different to help people like you and other fundraisers actually see the impact that testing and optimization can make, how modeling this idea of I don't know, but maybe I can find out can really move the needle, not just in our fundraising results, but on generosity as a whole. So we have just released episode 1 of a brand new show called Decoding Generosity. You can go check it out here. You can go scan the QR code or go to decodinggenerosity.com to check out the first episode. I think it's pretty fun, although I've seen it like 10 times now, and it's awkward to go watch myself on a screen. But go check it out. Go check out the first episode that's all about providing clarity in our copy and ways that we can improve just the language we use about giving and generosity. And on top of that, in every single episode, someone, and it might be you, will win a $1,000 donation to your organization. So be sure to go to decodinggenerosity.com, go fill out the form to sign up for updates and to be on the wheel of generosity, because you might win a $1,000 donation by the end of it. That's all I've got for you today. We've got a few minutes left, I think, where we can answer some questions. I see probably the primary question that's in the chat is, was Eric Tamales the one who was upset about Pittsburgh? If you know Eric, he actually sent me a text later and said, What's this about Pittsburgh? So word traveled fast that I had something bad to say, which I did not. Let me make that clear. I had nothing bad to say about Pittsburgh. All right, what real questions do we have?
As soon as you said that, I was thinking the exact same thing. I was like, wow, it was like Katie read my mind. But I love that. That was so great, Nathan. Thank you so much. And I think the one thing too is just like, even, as you're going throughout, there's like a common theme throughout each of these tactics and strategies. And that really goes back to honestly like your mission and like connecting with the donor and being able to relay that impact that you're making and having that value-based messaging, like you said. And that's what really helps move the needle forward. I was curious though, like what you said for the that cultivation in that first 7 days. Was there anything that you saw that was correlated between multi-channel and between that first outreach in the 7 days, whether there was that one specific email led to more donations, or if that multi-channel approach ended up seeing astronomical results or anything like that? I was curious what you saw there.
Yeah, multi-channel is interesting because it's really hard to go measure. And even on this side, when you've donated to 211 organizations to also track all your mailbox and who it came from and what times, it gets really complicated. So for the sake of this study, we're focusing on those online engagement tools. But I will say we've seen many indicators of the effect multi-channel can have just on conversion in a bunch of different ways. There's an experiment we show often around the year-end season where one organization sent just a postcard that just said thank you. It was around the Thanksgiving holiday in the US, and that's all it was. Just a message from the president of the organization saying thanks, I'm grateful for you. And that one postcard, when we looked at results at the very end of the season, led to, I believe the number is like 190 something percent increase in someone's likelihood to give just because you sent a thank you postcard. So those multi-channel touch points are so critical. And we've even seen things like, running more branded advertising over the top of a direct mail campaign. So targeting your direct mail audience on Facebook with branded advertising can lead to more people actually saying yes and giving via your direct mail campaign or your email appeal. So those multi-channel touch points are really critical, but they do get really hard to actually measure in a meaningful way.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. That's crazy. Especially too, even the study that came out at the end of year multi-channel, it talked about like the 300% increase in lifetime donors by using multi-channel during your year-end fundraising campaigns, which is just crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, curious like from just like that perspective of, is it like email versus like direct mail? And I guess it really depends on the organization as well, what in your donors and how they like to be communicated with. But
yeah, and I think
crazy.
even just that stat I showed earlier of even if someone's never going to give to you in an online channel, having that email address to cultivate them in a multi-channel way gives you more touch points, gives them more opportunity to connect with you, and can lead to greater value over time. And also, there's often a fear of like, our online donors that I acquire that way, are they as valuable as an offline donor and that sort of thing? The reality is those donors are actually way easier to convert into a multi-channel relationship, because when someone gives to you online, you have their email address and you get their mailing address. And so you can cultivate them in both channels. And we've even been doing some kind of deeper research into trying to understand truly the difference between those two different cohorts, offline acquired donors, online acquired donors. And what we're seeing is that there's no meaningful difference in their likelihood of sticking around between an offline and online channel, meaning it's cheaper to actually go acquire donors online. And if they stick around for just as long, then why don't we put our acquisition focus there and then use offline sources as another multi-channel approach in order to boost retention? So there's all these different ways these pieces fit together that can impact this kind of problem.
That's crazy. That's such good insight. This was so insightful and so helpful. If we have any other questions or anything, feel free to stick around. But other than that, Nathan, thank you so much for coming and hopping on here and just really diving into the meat and bones of all this information and really just like helping us understand and digest what it actually means and how we can actually have long-term sustainable donor retention,
Yes.
which, you know, is the question. The ultimate question is, I don't know. And so, you know, and I think that's the one aspect is we're all here together and we're all looking to learn from one another and be able to have those strategies, and doing a lot through like A/B testing and everything like that. So,
and isn't it freeing to be able to admit that you don't have to have all the answers? Doesn't that free us up so much? Takes so much pressure off, and then allows us to go actually find what meaningfully works. So
I don't know, go grab a cup of coffee and get back to it. Get back to understanding. All right. Well, Nathan, thank you so much. Everyone, thank you so much for hopping on and spending time with us. This is recorded, so we will be sending out this recording as well. Feel free to go grab a copy of that of the study that Nathan was referring to, and really diving into all of that as well. It is linked in the chat and also the QR code. Thank you, Nathan. And sign up for the Decoding Generosity. That is such a cool thing that you guys are doing, and think that will help a lot. So thank you guys.
It's my favorite thing we're doing, and there's a Halloween episode coming up in a couple of weeks. So definitely sign up so you can see it.
Love to see that. Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. And let us know if you need anything.
Thank y'all. Bye.